blaming her, it was her fault, ikaw kasi, etc. No? Merong mga sinasabi. There was even this supposed Instagram story of a supposed relative of Mr. Desiderios that, well, went after Agatha in so many words. How are we supposed to look at this kind of a reaction? Yung victim shaming, yung biktima ang may problema.
Well, Pia, to give you context on my field of work, I specifically deal in the space of gender as it pertains to sports, so the intersection of sports and gender. And what we see is that women face different kinds of stigma whenever they speak out against violence against women. We see this in greater society, not just in sports. When a woman speaks out about leaving an abusive relationship, she is often criticized for lacking patience, for not trying hard, and for leaving when your marriage vows say till death do us part. But then when a woman endures for a very long time and then eventually leaves, she's also criticized for leaving and being told that, oh, why did you stay if you knew it was bad? So this kind of stigmatization of victims is a factor that we need to consider, because when you look at the data, all of the research points to the fact that a survivor's willingness to report violence and pursue legal action is undermined by societal and structural barriers such as stigma, shame, and a distrust of institutions. For example, if they have seen that similar cases did not prosper or their perpetrators were not met with adequate accountability, it disincentivizes women from speaking out in the future. And this is why concrete action needs to be baked in into the league and into the individual teams and into society in general.
We'll go back to that point of concrete action, what concrete action and policy we're talking about in just a bit. But I wanted to go first to these different cases. You already mentioned one other player earlier. Let's, syempre ang tanong dito, hindi naman ito isolated case. There were others. So can we discuss that for a bit?
Yes, Pia. We've learned about many individual cases over the years, but it's time that we look at them not as isolated cases, but as a symptom of a larger problem within our sports industry. Because, like you said, this is not just about the allegations against Paul Desiderio. Earlier this year, there was an allegation against Bo Belga made by his wife, alleging abandonment, abuse, and withholding of child support, which is considered financial abuse. Last year, 2021, Gio Halalon was accused by his wife, Christina, of infidelity and what she called, quote, physical, mental, and emotional abuse. The year before that, Calvin Abueva, who I mentioned earlier, his wife took to social media and uploaded CCTV footage alleging abuse against herself and their children. And in 2018, Mac Cardona was arrested after stabbing his former live-in partner after she refused to get back into a relationship with him. So there have been public statements about this in the past, but ultimately, all of these players are still playing in the PBA, except for Mac Cardona, who has gone on to have a career in the MPBL. And this is not a new story. For older PBA fans, they might remember the retired player Paul Bong Alvarez, who was arrested in 2007 for assaulting his then wife, and later he was arrested again in 2017 for assaulting his girlfriend. So what we're seeing here is a pattern of behavior enabled by a culture and by structures within the sports industry that silence and sideline women's voices and concerns.
Nagkataon pa, we had this 2.5 year, 2-year lockdown. So, and this is like the world over. If you have an abusive situation at home, it gets worse in a lockdown because you are locked in that home, right? Together.
Yes, absolutely. This is supported by data from United Nations Women, and they show us that first, that gender-based violence is on the rise during lockdown because women spend more time with their abusers. There is no break time in which you go to work or your partner goes to work. You are at home 24/7. And furthermore, the data shows us that a key factor in this abuse is the exploitation of power imbalance within relationships. So, for example, studies done in America have shown that in domestic violence cases involving professional athletes, factors include the disproportionate amount of wealth, power, and fame.
Well, let's go back to the Philippine setting. So kanina pinag-uusapan natin, hindi naman ito mga isolated cases. So can we say the opposite, that these are interconnected cases and that they have to do with a certain kind of culture, meaning the PBA culture or the sports industry culture? And corollary to that, what can you do? What can we women who are in the PBA do? What have you already done? What are those little steps that you've taken to heal these issues in that culture?
Well, it is a problem that is common in all male-dominated spaces, not just in our industry, but also in corporate settings that are male-dominated, in academic institutions that are male-dominated. There is a propensity for this kind of pattern to emerge. And in my limited capacity as a consultant for some PBA teams, I have encouraged my team to consider award-winning female athletes as their PBA muses, the hope being that we can present a more holistic image of what women in sports can be. However, this, again, is very limited, and real change really is only going to be possible through structural change, meaning changes in policies and their consistent implementation. So I want to take this via to an example in the NFL, because this shows us precedent. After a viral video in 2014, which showed the star player of the Ravens, that's Ray Rice, hitting his fiancée, the NFL has actually instituted preemptive training programs for players as well as team employees, and they've enforced stricter penalties against abusers. The team in question, Ravens, they also now have a policy to avoid drafting players with a history of abuse, and they've made donations to nonprofits that support survivors of violence. Granted, there are still questions in the NFL about the consistent application of such policies, but it gives us a roadmap. It gives us a blueprint for what we can follow in the Philippines. So if you want to ask me about something concrete we can do, every year there is a PBA player development seminar. Perhaps we can make gender-based violence and violence against women a topic for discussion there. Change really starts with accepting that our reality is not fixed and progress is possible. We need to get more women's voices in the room, but I would also like to add that we need the men to stand with us. It's important, like you said, women in my position, we do what we can, but ultimately, if we want to see change, equality takes all of us. Progress takes all of us. And so we need the men in our industry to stand with us, side by side, pushing with equal force. And so I would just, I guess, like to say as well that coming forward with one's allegations is incredibly difficult for any survivor, and it is a courageous decision. At the end of the day, we should be working towards an environment that encourages survivors, not just in sports, but in society as general. Encourage them to come forward. Encourage them that there will be support, there will be accountability. And through this, we can discourage and prevent violence in the first place.
Well, thank you for joining us and adding your voice to the, those other voices. Sports journalist Siege Tantenko, maraming salamat. On to a Filipino cager overseas, a major career move for Kai Soto, now under the same agency as NBA stars Russell Westbrook and Klay Thompson. Soto signed with Wasserman, a company based in Los Angeles in the U.S. The towering 20-year-old was previously under agent Joel Bell, who helped him land a spot in Australia's National Basketball League. And that is it for now. Join me again on News.ph at 7 p.m. I'm Iyo HONTIVEROS for Newsnight, where we go above and beyond the headlines.
This